How's it going, guys? Scott here. I wanted to do something different today. I didn't want to do another gameplay video, but I do have something that I've wanted to make for a long time, and that is my top 5 best ships in FTL, from the 5th strongest all the way up to the best ship in the game, because it's something that always gets discussed, and it's really interesting to see people's different opinions on what they think is really, really good, or what they think is like really average. And I thought maybe I'd kind of talk about my list, my best 5 ships. And before we go into it, there are a couple of things that we need to recognize. Is that I will be talking about playing on the hard difficulty, and I will be talking about having advanced edition enabled. These two are pretty important because they do actually affect how good a ship can be, because some ships require a lot more scrap to be successful than others, and Advanced Edition also plays a really, really big part in this as well, because some ships basically start with hacking, or they have weapons that were introduced with Advanced Edition. So just keep those in mind, and also that the great thing about FTL is that everyone has their own opinion, everyone has their own way to play, and everyone has their likes and dislikes. And even though these may not be your 5 best ships that you think, whatever your opinion is, that's totally valid as well. So let me have my list. Before we get into number 5 on the list, just a quick honorable mention to the NGC. It comes in really, really close to the top 5, but I think it just loses out because it has drone control, and I don't really like drone control that much, especially when it is a forced system, because it basically is a fairly useless system unless you can pick up a defense drone. So the NGC, very, very close, number 6, but I guess, you know, we're doing top 5, so. Anyway, number 5 on the list is the Zoltan A. Incredibly powerful ship. It turns out having Zoltan shields and a halberd beam from Sector 1 is really, really good. When we look at how good a ship is, we're mostly looking at how they perform in the early sectors, Sectors 1 and 2, because what will generally happen in FTL is if you have a very good early game of Sector 1, 2, and 3, you will actually start snowballing in a good way, and the run will come along really, really nicely. And for some ships that happens regularly, and for other ships that happens very irregularly, the poorer ships, the ships that don't perform as well. So having Zoltan shields from the get-go means that we can actually not take very much damage at all in the early sectors, which is really, really great, because if we're not taking any damage, then we're actually going to be accumulating scrap that we can use for other things to start to get that snowball going. And the other big thing is the halberd beam. Halberd beam is a ridiculously powerful weapon, and to have that from the get-go is just really, really strong. You don't have to ever worry about missing with your very few volleys that you have. Some ships might only have one weapon that's a laser. If it misses, damn, that really sucks. But the halberd beam, very, very consistent weapon. And what you'll find is that when you do play with a halberd beam, the game's kind of theme turns into keeping the halberd beam damage relevant, so that you can continue to do really large amounts of damage to ships and just causing absolute havoc. The other benefit is in some of the early stages of the game, there will be ships that will try to run away, and if you can do a lot of damage to different systems, you can have all sorts of positive effects from this halberd beam, like pulling their pilot out of the chair and forcing him to do repairs. It just drops their evasion, it stops them running away. It's just a really, really good weapon. Really, really good weapon. So to have that from the get-go, and to have that protective Zoltan shield from the get-go, a lot of the times you're just not taking any damage. The actual layout of the ship is really nice as well. I couldn't actually find any images of the layouts. I might have, I don't know, but basically there's only a couple of places on the ship that are a real kind of danger zone, that being in the bottom left hand area, being in the engines, but Apart from that, everything is very, very ventable. Everything is very nice and safe. You have a lot of these hallways, buffer rooms where you can vent anyone that boards, things like that. You have your 3 Zoltan jelly babies who will provide power for your ship, so you have a little bit of extra reactor power from the get-go. You can become immune to early ion weapons, which is really, really good, giving you a little bit of an advantage. Later on in the game, these Zoltan are not quite as strong anymore. You would really like to pick up a mix of crew because Zoltan are a very immobile crew member. You don't really want them moving around the ship because they'll be powering and depowering systems as they move through rooms, and they're not very good at combat or fighting fires or fixing breaches. So as long as you can pick up some extra crew and keep the halberd beam doing a lot of damage, then the Zoltan A is just a really, really strong, consistent ship. It takes a lot for it to really start having a hard time. Next on the list we have number 4. We have the Slugsea, and the Slugsea is it's actually my favorite ship in the game. It has a bit of a higher skill ceiling, and some would also say it has a higher skill floor. So a higher skill ceiling means that if you play it really, really well, you can get a lot out of it. But to have a high skill floor means that for the ship to perform well, you also have to play it kind of well as well to get kind of a good thing happening. But we start with 2 systems on the Slugsea, hacking and mind control, and these are incredibly powerful systems, not only because it lets us build very, very offensively or very, very defensively. It's also the fact that starting with 2 systems means that they don't appear in stores, and if we don't have systems appearing in stores, there's a higher chance that other things will appear, like cloaking, which is typically our 3rd kind of system upgrade for the Slugsea. In the early game, the chain laser that it starts with is probably its weakest point, but if we can do some good hacking and mind control of enemy weapon systems, what we'll find is that the enemy weapons will go down very regularly without us taking any damage, and then from there, there are a lot of crew kills that can be gained through mind control. And as I've just talked about, the better Sector 1 and 2 you have, the better time you're going to have in the rest of your run. So if you can get these free crew kills from mind control, as well as disabling enemy weapons, that just leads into a really, really strong mid-game. We also have upgraded doors and 3 slug crew members, so we're actually completely immune to mind control. And the layout on the Slugsea, once again, is really, really incredible. In between all of the important system rooms, or even just attached to the important system rooms, we can vent, and being boarded just becomes a real non-event. It's just not very scary at all. So really, really good ship. And something I didn't say earlier that I should have mentioned is it's a 4 weapon slot ship as well. Same with the Zoltan A. Having 4 weapons gives us a little bit of flexibility to our final weapon build. Next up we have this is a close one. This is really, really close, but number 3 on my list is the Stealth A. I was really, really tempted to put the Stealth A at number 2, but I didn't, and I'll explain later, but I think the Stealth A is like, it's almost, it really, like these top 3, they're really, really close, but the Stealth A could very much be the strongest ship in the game. I can't remember the last time I lost with the Stealth A. It's just it's an absolute powerhouse, even though it doesn't start with shields. Having cloaking, long-ranged scanners, and 2 very, very strong weapons, the dual laser and the mini beam, we can really get a lot out of the early sectors. We can absolutely pick up every single combat, pick up a whole bunch of money, and then start snowballing really, really hard. And there's also titanium system casing in the bank for some reason, so you have an extra 40 scrap to begin with. It's so consistent. It's really, really, like, once you've picked up your shields, which is usually your first upgrade on the Stealth A, That's the only thing. That's the only real weakness. Is no shields means that beams or beam drones can cause a little bit of havoc, but once you have those level 1 shields, you can really just go to town and you can start maximizing every single sector. So you just end up just with a ridiculous score, a ridiculous amount of ships defeated. It's just really cool. It's a really, really fun ship to play. It does have a slight necessity in picking up hacking because it only has 3 weapon slots. But the upside, or I guess the silver lining, is that at the 2 weapons that you start with are actually very, very overpowered, and you can actually keep them for the whole run. And I would actually recommend doing so. The mini beam itself just jumps the whole ship up in like in the rankings by a lot. Mini beam is a really, really overpowered weapon because it's a 1 power beam that can actually swipe up to 4 rooms on an enemy ship and cause fires. And what this basically means that once you've caused damage to 3 to 4 different systems, same with the halberd beam, you've actually pulled their pilot out of his chair, reducing the enemy's evasion, doing a lot of damage to their hull, and then after that your subsequent volleys get even stronger. And once you pick up hacking, you actually you change up your style of firing your weapons so that instead of using your dual lasers to take down shields so that your mini beam can do damage, your mini beam is actually firing first to get that evasion drop, and then you're doing a lot of damage to like a really scary enemy system like their weapons. It just ends up being a really, really consistent ship. And by having 2 of the starting weapons in our finished loadout, you don't even really need to spend much money on weapons at all, which lets you focus on things like defense. It's just really, really strong. And every time we play the Stealthea, the scores, it's reflected in the scores that we get. I can't remember the last time we got sub 6,000 with the Stealthea. Just a super amount of jumps, a super amount of ships defeated, because we just go ship to ship. Anyway, super good. I recommend it. Number 2 on our list is the Crystal B. Crystal B is a bit of an interesting one. The Crystal B is a little bit of an oddity because all of the other ships on this list have extremely strong early game, where Sector 1 and Sector 2 really pose no kind of threat. The Crystal B is a little bit opposite, where Sector 1 and 2 can actually be a little bit of an RNG kind of grab bag because we don't have any weapons to destroy drones, and we cannot lower Zoltan shields without risking some damage and having the Crystal Vengeance fire, which is the crystal augment that comes in the bank. And we really don't want to use that. It's a 10% chance to do 1 point of damage to an enemy ship. It's not very good. So the Crystal B, I mean, if you don't get like ships with Zoltan shields and drone ships where you can't kill the finishing blow, it just kind of snowballs out of control really, really quickly. And the biggest thing that makes the Crystal B absolutely insane is not the 4-man teleporter, which is already very good, not the cloaking, which is very good, but it is actually the lockdown ability that comes from your Crystal crew members. By using lockdown, you can do a whole lot of things. If the enemy has a very scary weapon system, you can basically board 4 people into their weapons, lock all of the enemies out of the room, and then just go to town. And by the time you've rotated your lockdowns from your boarding crew, the enemy weapons are completely destroyed and you're completely safe. Sounds unfair, doesn't it? It really is. Similarly, you can also use it to block your enemies from going to the med bay as well, which is really good. So what eventually happens with the Crystal B on most runs is you will eventually just be sending 4 people over onto the enemy ship into whatever 2x2 tiled room there is, locking all of them into the room and killing them, and then cloaking perhaps whatever the scariest weapon on the enemy ship is. But each combat just ends up being about 10 to 15 seconds long, most times. And that is just super, super strong. In FTL, there is a what I believe there to be a general rule that things that happen faster are better. Fast equals good. So similarly to weapons, where slow weapons generally suck, if we can destroy all of their crew in 10 to 15 seconds, it's actually really overpowered. Crystal B, if you don't get those annoying ships that you just can't beat in Sector 1, providing you pick up some crew, you're actually able to go all the way through the game on very, very little. You really don't need a lot to get a victory out of the Crystal B. And you also have that bonus of having Crystal crew members on your ship so that you can go and check out Crystal Homeworld. It's one of the easiest ways to get there. Just rename one of your crew. The actual ship layout isn't too bad. The cloaking room being all the way up in the nose is a bit annoying because it's just kind of it takes a while to get up there if you need to do repairs and stuff. But the shields has venting, and what you'll eventually find is that your ship doesn't take much damage anyway, because fights are over so quickly. So the layout is kind of not that important anyway. The biggest thing that will halter? The biggest difficulty the Crystal B faces is enemy ships that have boarding, or cloaking, or both. So basically any rock sector. Anytime that your boarding is delayed, you're going to struggle, because that's when weapons are able to fire. That's when you have to delay your boarding crew to fight off intruders. So as long as you try to avoid that kind of situation, just every fight is a joke. You know, even the flagship, same dealio. Pick up hacking and just lock them in a room, kill them. Yeah. And that leads us to number 1, the best ship in the game, according to me. It is none other than the Lara Gnaeus B. Absolute powerhouse of a ship. What we've noticed is that starting with 2 systems is really, really good. So the Lara Gnaeus B starting with a teleporter and mind control is extremely strong. We also have a 2 Lara Gnaeus crew member and an NG. The Lara Gnaeus make for a really, really strong boarding team. And the NG is just a super good 3rd crew member that enables a lot of blue options. So it's just really, really nice. Just really, really nice. When we board with the Lara Gnaeus, there's not many things that can actually stand up to Lara Gnaeus crew, especially with that mind control. I do have a video on how to board properly with the Lara Gnaeus, because one of the things that we need to be aware of with the Lara Gnaeus B is that we need to keep our Lara Gnaeus crew members' HP as high as possible, because it's when they start dying that issues start arising. But once you've figured that out, and once you know how to board correctly, there's just not really a lot that can stand up to you. And the Lara Gnaeus B also is home to the best weapon in the game, the Advanced Flak. It is a 1 power flak, well, it's a 1 power flak 1 that actually has a faster firing time and it has a tighter accuracy. It is an absolute monster weapon, not only because of the stats that I just said to you, but because it's 1 power, it can lead to some really insane weapon combinations. So normally when we think of good weapon combinations, we think something like, you know, 2 flaks and 2 burst lasers. That's an 8 power weapon combination. Okay, well that's really good. Or we think of, you know, 3 2 power weapons or something like that. But what the Advanced Flak enables is it enables a 3 power weapon to be added to that mix. So instead of having a 2 power, 2 power, 2 power, and then not being able to use that 3rd power weapon, we'll say a halberd beam or a heavier a heavy laser 2, we can suddenly fit that into our weapon build, and that is extremely silly. It's very, very silly to be able to say, well, I have 3 flaks and a halberd beam. It's just incredibly strong having that extra point of versatility in the weapon build. So it's just really, really good. The clone bay is also a little bit of a plus. It's a bit of a minor point, but having a clone bay enables us to participate in events that we wouldn't normally able to with a med bay, because we could permanently lose crew. That's a nice one. The only real downside, I guess, to the Lara Gnaeus B is the ship itself is quite large, and sometimes getting boarded in the top area of the ship, you're going to lose your oxygen every now and then. But it's just it's a really, 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 really strong ship. Ah, the other point. The Lara Gnaeus, what a lot of people, well, no, not what a lot of people don't realize, but I've heard some people say that you should, like, when you pick up 2 Mantis, you might, oh, we should board with the Mantis. The Lara Gnaeus are actually extremely strong at boarding. Normally, boarding ships, their weakness is auto drones, because you can't board them very effectively. And the Lara Gnaeus can board auto drones extremely effectively. In the early game, they can go and take out one of the 2 weapons so that you're immune to damage. And in the late game, they can actually go straight into the piloting, which is really nice because we typically don't buy hacking on the Lara Gnaeus. We would just get cloaking to have 1 defensive system. So without hacking, you're still able to drop those auto drones evasion all the way down to 0 by just boarding into their piloting room and taking out their piloting. And then that's just really, really good. All in all, that's my top 5. I think a couple of those could possibly swap a little bit. The Stealth A especially, it really feels like it could be number 2 or even number 1. It's that good. But I've from my past experiences, and the amount of times that we've played with these ships, it just the consistency and the what do you call it? The chance of a certain ship doing well. I just have to put them in this order, you know. We can't quite put the Crystal B at number 1 because of that really bad Sector 1 chance. We can't quite put the Stealth A ahead of a ship that has an advanced flak, you know? So, yeah, that's it. That's my top 5. Let me know what you think. Let me know what your top 5 are as well. I'd love to hear from you and read what people believe are the most amazing ships. And if you like this video, we can perhaps do another one. Maybe we can do the worst 5. That would be an interesting one. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. And if you liked what you saw, feel free to check me out on Twitch. Come say hello, watch our live stream, or you can hit the subscribe button here. I'm Scott, and I'm out. See you later.